This video focuses on the past and present of bioethics, exploring past examples and how that has impacted today's rules for medical experiments, as well as why it is so important to follow these rules. Warning, this video contains sensitive and potentially triggering content and images. So, what is bioethics? A simple definition would be the study of ethical, social, and legal issues in the context of biomedical research and biomedicine. There are four major areas of bioethics. There's medical ethics, which deals with ethical issues in healthcare, research ethics, which deals with ethical issues in research, environmental ethics, which deals with ethical issues in the relationship between humans and the environment, and public health ethics, which deals with ethical issues in public health. Now that we know what bioethics is, let's talk about how it is used. The people who study bioethics are termed bioethicists, and their job is to study, progress, and inform others about bioethics. This typically consists of researching legal and ethical issues in biomedicine, teaching courses and leading seminars on bioethics, establishing and serving on ethics committees, helping to draft new institutional policies, and providing advice and consultation on ethical issues to other professionals. Unfortunately, bioethics guidelines and enforcement hasn't always existed, which allowed many violations to occur. Our main example in the history of bioethics is Joseph Mengele. Who was Joseph Mengele? Joseph Mengele, also known as the Angel of Death, was an SS physician who had a background in medicine and physical anthropology. Though Mengele did not actively participate in Nazi activities, Mengele's research mirrored the Nazi ideology of racial superiority, that the Aryan race is above others. He was among the scientists who were not stripped of their rights. In 1943, Mengele was assigned to Auschwitz, the largest of the Nazi death camps. There, he conducted genetic research on human subjects, the prisoners. Mengele considered himself a researcher, unlike many other SS doctors. Mengele's main objective for this research at Auschwitz was to make it his basis for his postdoctoral thesis, which was necessary in order to obtain a chair at a university. Joseph Mengele was best known for his unethical testing methods that disregarded the safety of his human subjects. One of the experiments that he was most known for were his ophthalmic experiments studying the role of hereditary factors in eye color in order to demonstrate hereditary differences in iris structure based on race. Mengele's opportunity for conducting these experiments arrived when a gypsy family, who had several family members with heterochromia and twins, came to Auschwitz after all gypsies were deported to the camps. After dissection, he removed the eyes of his victims and sent them back to another Nazi geneticist, Verscher. What was unusual about these eyeballs, however, were that they ranged from a color of very pale yellow to bright blue, green, and violet. This was the result of Mengele injecting agents into the eyes of his subjects to find a cure for heterochromia. He attempted to mimic another Nazi scientist's experiment on rabbit eyes, but unlike those experiments, where the eye drops reportedly did not pose any threats of death or suffering to the rabbits, Mengele took it upon himself to use injections because he believed they would be more effective. He used adrenaline injections, which almost always led to his subjects permanently losing their sight. He would even perform this experiment on newborn babies, who often died due to the injections. Another method he used was injecting methylene blue into brown-eyed children's eyes, which would cause severe pain, suppuration, and partial blindness. This was all in part of the greater scheme to produce a superior Aryan race, the agenda that Hitler pushed. Another notorious experimentation done by Mengele were his twin experiments. He was obsessed with studying twins, what made them identical versus fraternal, how genetic diseases originated and affected them, and distinguishing genetic traits versus traits that formed from the environment they were raised in. He would intentionally inject a disease into one twin, then transfuse this infected blood into the other twin. Because Mengele had no plans of curing the twins after he finished his observations, many of his subjects died. After these experiments, if the twins were not already dead, he would kill them and dissect them, so that he could study the internal organ system of each twin. Eva Kor was a prisoner of Auschwitz, and she and her twin sister were among the many victims of Joseph Mengele. In an interview, she provided details of her experience with Mengele. She explained that 3 times a week, she and her twin would be placed naked in a room for 6 to 8 hours to be measured and studied. She described it to be unbelievably demeaning. After one injection she had received during an experiment, Eva said she had developed a high fever, and Mengele told her she'd only have 2 weeks to live. Miraculously, she was able to survive partly through her strong will because she knew if she died, Miriam would be killed so that Mengele could perform a double autopsy. However, when Eva survived, Mengele continued his experiments on both twins, and as a result of the intensive experiments, Miriam's kidneys stopped growing. Her death by bladder cancer is believed to be linked to the torture she had to endure from Mengele. Given that Mengele's research took place in a concentration camp, there was no consent asked to the study subjects. In some experiments, death was the intended outcome. There was little consideration for the victims' well-being. Backed by Nazi dogma, killing the so-called degenerate races was allowed. It was unthinkable that they should be allowed to procreate. Mengele mirrored this belief regarding genetics to determine whether one was fit to live. This research is considered so unethical that it would be extremely disrespectful to the victims and their families if it was ever used in the scientific community. The macabre experiments of Mengele and other Nazi scientists brought attention to the need for established ethics to govern human experimentation, leading to the 1947 Nuremberg Code of Ethics, which is considered the first foundational document of contemporary medical ethics. It established the need for informed consent in human experimentation, that the humanitarian benefit of an experiment must be greater than the risks of the experiment, and that the experiment must be able to be terminated at any stage by either the researcher or subject, as well as the need for animal experimentation prior to human experimentation. The ethical principles established by the Nuremberg Code are still used today. The World Medical Association, or WMA, was founded in 1947 by Allied physicians. Its original purpose was to provide healthcare and education to post-war Europe, but as more details about Nazi experimentation became known, they also sought to restore ethics and integrity to medicine. In 1948, the WMA issued an updated version of the Hippocratic Oath called the Declaration of Geneva, which added a promise to not discriminate by age, disease or disability, creed, ethnic origin, gender, nationality, political affiliation, race, sexual orientation, social standing, or any other factor, and incorporated some aspects of the Nuremberg Code. The Declaration of Geneva is still in use today and has been updated 6 times since 1948, with the most recent update being in 2017. MKUltra was a mind control experiment conducted by the CIA during the Cold War. Human subjects were secretly drugged and then psychologically, physically, verbally, and sexually abused in attempts to break their minds down and make them susceptible to brainwashing. The CIA ordered all files related to MKUltra to be destroyed, but due to improper storage, over 20,000 files survived. MKUltra led to President Gerald Ford issuing the first executive order on intelligence activities in 1976, which prohibited drug use on human subjects without informed consent. Presidents Carter and Reagan later expanded this to apply to all human experimentation. So what does all of this mean? Because of the many bioethical violations in the past, bioethical guidelines were put in place in order to protect people and other living beings from mistreatment in the pursuit of science. However, this does not eliminate bioethical controversies in the modern day. As our knowledge of science and technology grows, we have found new avenues to explore that are not yet defined by bioethical guidelines. A key example of this is CRISPR. CRISPR stands for Clustered Regularly Interspaced Palindromic Repeats, which is used by scientists to selectively modify the DNA of living organisms. In 2018, CRISPR was used by Dr. He-Jian Cui to genetically modify 2 babies, Lulu and Nana, to have greater resilience against HIV. This has raised many questions in the scientific community as to the ethicalness of Dr. He-Jian Cui's work. Not only are the long-term effects of genetic modification on humans unknown, the 2 test subjects were unable to consent as they were babies. However, there are not direct bioethical guidelines against the genetic modification of living organisms because it is a problem that humanity has yet to face in the past. So as we continue to improve and grow, it is important that the bioethical guidelines grow and change with us. But what does all of this boil down to? Why do bioethics matter? For starters, bioethics keep everyone safe and anonymous. Consent forms and disclosure agreements are just a couple of ways that people's rights and privacy are protected in experiments. It is also important to note how important consent is for experiments. Because of bioethics, a person must willingly agree to partake in an experiment, and they can withdraw at any given time. And, more importantly, it is unethical to perform experiments on live humans. Protective agencies and other measures also help to ensure our protection in live testing. The FDA ensures that drugs and other products must be deemed safe for human testing after vigorous research before human testing can begin. The Nuremberg Code is a direct result of the human rights violations committed by Mengele and set ethical principles for human experimentation. These are just a few of the agencies and codes in place to protect us, our autonomy, and our safety. All of this talk about bioethics culminates to how we can improve. As we improved in the past, there is always room to improve in the present. The first step is ensuring that our bioethics codes and regulations continue to update and change in order to keep up with science as it advances. We need to take into account new challenges such as gene editing, AI, and others. Additionally, since we have progressed so far scientifically, we should stop live animals testing. Just as we have declared it unethical to test on live human subjects, we should stop testing on live animal subjects and find a new alternative. Another method is informing people about the Nazi experiments and why it's important to follow bioethics rules. In a study done to determine this, it was found that 67.6% of the female and 57.3% of the male interviewees held the confrontation with topics of Nazi medicine as important for their later medical career. However, the study also found many students across 3 universities in Austria were not very knowledgeable about Nazi medicine. Understanding and implementing these things will help to create a safe and ethical scientific community. Thank you.